deadly rattlesnake bite, a desperate choice. When the son of a Comanche chief lies dying, the captured woman must decide whether to risk her own life to save his. What she does next will change everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The dust swirled across the barren plains of West Texas as the small band of Comanche warriors returned to their encampment. Leading them was Takawatan, son of Chief Peruasamena of the Penateca Band. At 25 winters, Takawatan had already earned the respect of his fellow warriors through his skills in battle and horsemanship. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as they approached the village nestled beside a creek lined with cottonwood trees. Among them rode a white woman, her hands bound loosely to her saddle horn. Catherine Dawson had been captured 3 months earlier during a raid on her family's homestead near Fort Worth. At 22, with copper-colored hair and eyes the shade of prairie grass, she was considered valuable by the Comanche. Most captives were either ransomed back to the whites, traded to Mexican settlements, or integrated into the tribe. Catherine's fate remained uncertain, as she had neither been harmed nor fully accepted. "We return with good hunting," Takawatan announced in Comanche as they entered the village. Women emerged from teepees to welcome the warriors, their eyes falling curiously on the white woman who had survived longer than most captives without being traded away or adopted. Nauta, Takawatan's mother, approached Catherine and helped her down from the horse. Though they couldn't communicate through words, Nauta had shown Catherine kindness, teaching her to prepare hides and gather plants for food and medicine. Catherine had proven herself useful, and this had earned her a precarious place within the community. "Your father wishes to speak with you," Nauta told her son in their native tongue. "The white men have sent a messenger about trading for the woman." Takawatan frowned, glancing at Catherine. Though she couldn't understand their words, she recognized her status as the subject of their conversation. In the months of her captivity, she had observed Takawatan closely. Unlike some warriors who viewed her with contempt or barely concealed desire, his gaze held something different: curiosity, perhaps even respect for her resilience. That evening, as the council fire burned bright, Chief Peruasamena addressed the gathered warriors. "The white soldiers offer 3 rifles and a horse for the woman," he said, his weathered face illuminated by the flames. "They will meet us at the river crossing in 5 days." Takawatan remained silent, but his thoughts churned. The white woman had earned a place among them, learning their ways without complaint. She worked beside the Comanche women, never attempting to escape, though he knew she watched the horizon where white settlements lay. Something about her quiet determination had earned his admiration. "I will take her," he finally said, "along with 5 warriors. We will see if the white men's offer is genuine or a trap." Later that night, as Catherine sat outside the teepee she shared with 2 older women, Takawatan approached. He spoke in broken English, words he had learned through trading with settlers and Mexican merchants. "You go back to your people soon," he said, crouching before her. Catherine's heart raced. For months she had adapted to survive, learning Comanche ways while holding on to hope of returning to what remained of her family. But now, faced with the possibility, she felt an unexpected hesitation. "My family," she began, unsure how to express complex emotions with limited shared language. "Are they alive?" Takawatan shook his head. No. White soldiers come. Bring trade." He gestured toward the distant horizon. 5 sons. We go." Catherine nodded, studying his face in the moonlight. Unlike other warriors who saw her as merely a commodity, Takawatan had shown her small kindnesses: extra food, protection from unwanted advances, occasional words in English. A strange connection had formed between them, built on mutual curiosity and unspoken respect. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing he understood the meaning if not the depth behind her words. The following days passed in a flurry of preparation. Catherine found herself torn between hope for freedom and apprehension about returning to a world that would never understand what she had experienced. She had witnessed both brutality and beauty among the Comanche, learned their customs, and survived by adapting rather than resisting. On the fourth day before their departure, Tahkawatan invited Catherine to accompany him and two other warriors on a hunting expedition. This unusual privilege wasn't lost on her. It signaled a trust few captives ever earned. As they rode across the rolling plains, Catherine marveled at the way the Comanche seemed one with their horses, moving as single beings across the landscape. Tahkawatan led them to a rocky outcropping where deer often came to drink from a hidden spring. "Wait here," he instructed her, pointing to a sheltered spot. "We circle around." Catherine nodded, settling into the shade of a large boulder. She watched as the warriors separated, moving with practiced stealth through the tall grasses. For a brief moment she considered the possibility of escape. She was on a horse, relatively unguarded. But where would she go? The vast, unforgiving landscape would likely claim her life before she found any white settlement. As she waited, a movement caught her eye, a sinuous shape slithering across the sun-warmed rocks nearby. The diamondback rattlesnake's warning came too late as Tahkawatan rounded the boulder, his attention focused on tracking the deer. "Look out!" Catherine cried. But the snake had already struck, its fangs sinking into Tahkawatan's calf just above his moccasin. The warrior's reaction was instant. With remarkable speed, he drew his knife and killed the rattlesnake with a single, precise strike. But the damage was done. Catherine knew from growing up on the frontier that a rattlesnake's venom could kill a man within hours without treatment. Tahkawatan's companions rushed to his side as he sank to the ground, his face stoic despite what must have been excruciating pain. Catherine dismounted quickly, her mind racing through everything she had learned about snake bites from both her father and the Comanche women. "I can help," she said urgently, pointing to the wound where two distinct puncture marks were already beginning to swell. "I know what to do." The warriors exchanged dubious glances, but Tahkawatan looked directly into her eyes and gave a slight nod. It was all the permission she needed. Without hesitation, Catherine knelt beside Tahkawatan, taking his knife from his hand. The other warriors tensed, but Tahkawatan barked an order in Comanche that made them step back, though they kept their hands on their weapons. "This will hurt," Catherine warned, using gestures to communicate what her limited Comanche vocabulary could not. With steady hands, she made a small, shallow X-cut over each fang mark, careful not to cut too deeply. Dark blood, already tinged with venom, oozed from the wounds. Catherine bent down without hesitation and placed her mouth over the cuts, sucking out the poisoned blood and spitting it onto the ground. She repeated this process several times, pausing occasionally to rinse her mouth with water from a skin bag one of the warriors offered. Tahkawatan watched her intently, his face betraying no pain though sweat beaded on his brow. The Comanche were taught from childhood to endure suffering silently, but Catherine could see the tension in his body as she worked. After drawing out as much venom as possible, Catherine tore a strip of cloth from her skirt and tied it firmly above the bite, tight enough to slow the spread of remaining poison, but not so tight as to cut off circulation completely. She had seen her father use this technique once on a ranch hand who'd survived a rattlesnake bite. "We need to get him back to camp," she told the warriors, mimicking riding motions. "The medicine women will have herbs that can help." The taller warrior, Ahavatoma, nodded in understanding. Together, they helped Tahkawatan onto his horse, with Ahavatoma mounting behind to support him. Catherine quickly gathered herbs she recognized from her time with Nata, plants the Comanche used for poultices and medicines. The journey back to camp seemed interminable. By the time they arrived, Tahkawatin's leg had swollen considerably, and his skin burned with fever. Nata rushed to meet them, her face creasing with concern when she saw her son's condition. "Rattlesnake," Catherine explained, using one of the Comanche words she knew, mimicking the serpent's movement with her hand. The older woman's eyes widened, then narrowed with purpose. She called out orders, sending young girls running for water and medicinal supplies. Catherine described through gestures and broken Comanche words what she had done, showing Nauta the bite and her makeshift treatment. To Catherine's surprise, Nauta nodded in approval, then motioned for her to follow as they carried Tahkawatan into the family's large teepee. Inside, they laid him on a bed of soft furs, removing his moccasins and leggings to fully expose the wounded leg. Over the next hours, Catherine worked alongside Nauta, applying poultices of crushed herbs and mud, to draw out the poison and reduce swelling. They brewed strong medicinal teas that Takawatan drank without complaint, though the bitter concoctions made even the hardiest warriors grimace. As night fell, Takawatan's fever worsened. He shifted between consciousness and delirium, occasionally mumbling words Catherine couldn't understand. Chief Perua Semena visited briefly, his stoic expression betraying little, but the length of his stay indicated the seriousness with which he viewed his son's condition. "You stay," Nata told Catherine in halting English when other women came to relieve them. "He trusts you." Catherine nodded, settling beside Takawatan's sleeping form. Throughout the night she bathed his forehead with cool water, adjusted the poultices as Nata had shown her, and watched his chest rise and fall with labored breaths. In these quiet hours, with just the sound of the night and his breathing, Catherine admitted to herself what she had been avoiding. She cared for this man, this warrior from a people she had been taught to fear. Toward dawn, Takawatan's eyes opened, clearer than they had been for hours. He studied Catherine's tired face in the dim light of the dying fire. "You saved me," he said in English, his voice rough from thirst. Catherine helped him drink from a water skin before replying, "You would have done the same." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, many would let enemy die." "I'm not your enemy," Catherine said softly, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. Takawatan reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "Why help me?" "Tomorrow, you go back to your people." Catherine looked down at their hands, so different yet similarly calloused from work and survival. "I don't know if they're still my people," she admitted. "Everything has changed." They sat in silence, the unspoken growing between them like the first green shoots after prairie fire. Finally, Takawatan spoke again, his words careful and measured. "You have heart of Comanche woman," he said. "Brave, strong." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Among her own people, women were valued for gentleness, for obedience. Here, among the Comanche, a woman's strength and courage were honored. In the months of her captivity, she had found aspects of herself that might never have emerged in her former life. "Rest now," she told him, adjusting the fur covering. "You'll need your strength." By midday, Takawatan's fever had broken. Nota examined the wound, nodding with satisfaction at the reduced swelling. Though he would need several days to recover fully, the worst had passed. Chief Perua Semena entered the teepee, his gaze moving from his son to Catherine, and back again. He spoke at length in Comanche, too quickly for Catherine to catch more than a few familiar words. Takawatan responded with equal intensity, occasionally gesturing toward Catherine. Finally, the chief turned to her. "My son says you saved his life," he said in surprisingly good English. "Says you have the courage of our greatest warriors and the wisdom of our healers." Catherine bowed her head respectfully, unsure how to respond to such high praise. "The exchange with white soldiers is tomorrow," the chief continued, "but my son asks that you be given choice." He studied her face carefully. "You may return to white people, or you may stay with Comanche as free woman, not captive. Decision is yours." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this possibility, to be offered a place among them, not as a captive, but as a respected member of the tribe. She looked at Takawatan, who watched her intently, his expression guarded yet hopeful. "I need time to think," she said finally. The chief nodded. "Until tomorrow, sun is high. Then we must go to meeting place, with or without you." After he left, Catherine sat in stunned silence. Takawatan struggled to sit up, waving away her concerned hand. "You should return to your world," he said, though his eyes conveyed a different message. "Life is hard here for white woman." "Life was hard there too," Catherine replied, thinking of the endless work, the threat of raids, the strict limitations placed on women. Different, but hard in its own way. Takawatan nodded in understanding. "Whatever you choose," he said carefully. "I am grateful for your hands and heart that saved me." That evening, Catherine walked alone to the creek's edge, watching the sunset paint the water with fire. In less than a day, she would either return to the world she was born into, or commit herself to a new life, among people who had once been strangers, but now felt increasingly like family. As stars appeared overhead, Catherine realized that the woman who had been taken captive months ago no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, shaped by hardship and survival, capable of making her own choices, seeing both worlds with clearer eyes. Whatever she decided, there would be no going back to who she had been before. Dawn broke over the Comanche camp with a palette of amber and crimson that seemed to Catherine like a sign, the spirits of this land speaking to her as Nata had taught. She had spent much of the night in contemplation, weighing a decision that would forever alter her path. As the first rays of sunlight touched the teepees, Catherine knew her answer. She found Chief Paruasamina already awake, sitting before a small fire outside his dwelling. The old leader acknowledged her approach with a slight nod, his weathered face impassive yet somehow kind. "I have made my decision," Catherine said, standing tall before him. The chief motioned for her to sit. "Speak your heart." Catherine took a deep breath. "I wish to stay with the people," she said, using the Comanche word for themselves, Numanu. "But I ask two things, that I may learn your language properly, and that if white traders ever bring news of my brother who might have survived, I be allowed to send him a message of my well-being." Chief Paruasamina studied her face, searching for any hesitation. Finding none, he nodded solemnly. "It will be as you ask. Nauta will continue to teach you our ways. You will be Puha Quitau, yellow flower, for your hair that catches the sun." He paused, then added, "My son lives because of your courage. The people will not forget this." Word spread quickly through the camp. Some warriors looked skeptical, some women curious, but Nauta welcomed the news with a rare smile, embracing Catherine with surprising strength for her age. "I knew when I first saw you," the older woman said in her limited English. "Strong spirit, like Comanche woman." Catherine spent the morning helping prepare medicines for Takawatan, whose strength was returning, though he still couldn't put weight on his injured leg. When she finally entered his teepee to change his bandages, he was sitting up, carving a small piece of antler with meticulous attention. "My father tells me you stay," he said without looking up. "Yes," Catherine replied, kneeling beside him to examine the wound. The swelling had reduced considerably, and the angry red streaks that had begun to spread up his leg were fading. Takawatan set down his carving. "Many will not understand, both my people and yours." "I don't seek their understanding," Catherine said, applying a fresh poultice of herbs. "Only my own." He caught her hand as she worked, causing her to meet his gaze. "Why choose this life?" Catherine considered his question carefully. "Because here, I am valued for my strength, not despite it. Because I've learned there is wisdom in your ways that my people never understood. Because," she hesitated, then finished honestly, "because something in my heart feels at home here in a way it never did before." Takawatan's expression softened. "The path will not be easy." "Few worthy paths are," she replied. Later that day, as promised, a small delegation rode out to meet the army representatives at the designated trading place. They brought news that the white woman had died from fever, a story the soldiers had little choice but to accept. The promised rifles and horse were declined. The Comanche would not trade for a dead captive. When the delegation returned, Catherine was officially welcomed into the tribe with a ceremony where she received gifts: a finely tanned deerskin dress adorned with beadwork, moccasins sized for her feet, and a small knife with a handle carved from buffalo bone. That night she sat among the women rather than apart, sharing food and attempting conversation in her growing Comanche vocabulary. As weeks passed, Catherine, now known as Puha Quitau, immersed herself fully in Comanche life. She learned to ride in the Comanche way, controlling her horse with knee pressure rather than reins. Nata taught her to identify medicinal plants, prepare pemmican for winter storage, and tan hides until they were soft as cloth. Her copper hair, which had once marked her as different, became a distinguished feature, often adorned with small feathers or beads that Takawatan carved for her. Takawatan's recovery progressed steadily. Once he could walk without pain, he began visiting Catherine daily, sometimes bringing small gifts: a perfectly shaped arrowhead, sweet berries gathered from distant bushes, a bracelet of polished stones. Their conversations grew longer as Catherine's command of Comanche improved, and they discovered shared values despite their different upbringings: respect for courage, appreciation of beauty and nature, and a deep sense of loyalty. The band moved camp twice as summer gave way to early autumn, following game and avoiding white patrols. With each relocation, Catherine felt less like a foreigner and more like a true member of the tribe. Children who had once watched her warily now sought her out for stories or to show her treasures they'd found. Women included her in their work circles, teaching her to weave baskets and sharing gossip she increasingly understood. One evening, as Catherine sat outside her teepee, now her own small dwelling gifted by the tribe, working a deer hide with a bone scraper, Takawatin approached. He had fully regained his strength, once again moving with the fluid grace that characterized Comanche warriors. "Walk with me?" he asked, gesturing toward the creek where cottonwoods rustled in the evening breeze. Catherine set aside her work and joined him, conscious of curious glances from others in the camp. Though not uncommon for men and women to speak together, their growing closeness had become a subject of quiet speculation. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a bend in the creek, sheltered by trees and out of sight from the camp. Here, Takawatin turned to her, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small object wrapped in soft hide. Catherine unwrapped it carefully to reveal an exquisite carving. A small horse fashioned from the antler he had been working on since his recovery. Details so precise she could see the flowing mane and expressive eyes. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her finger over the smooth surface. "Among my people," Takawatin explained, "when a warrior gives such a gift to a woman, it means he seeks permission to court her." He held her gaze steadily. "If you accept, it means you are willing to consider becoming his wife. Not immediately, but in time, after proper courtship." Catherine's heart quickened. Though she had sensed the deepening connection between them, the formal acknowledgement still caught her by surprise. Marriage to Takawatin would cement her place within the tribe, create a family to replace the one she had lost, and, she admitted to herself, fulfill the growing love she felt for him. "Is this truly possible?" she asked. "For me to be the wife of a chief's son?" Takawatin nodded. "My father has given his blessing," though some warriors questioned his wisdom. He said a woman who would risk her life to save another, even when she could have escaped, has a spirit worthy of our greatest leaders. His hand reached out to touch a strand of her copper hair. "And I have never met another, Comanche or white, with a heart like yours." Catherine closed her fingers around the carved horse, feeling its weight, light in her palm but heavy with meaning. "I accept your gift," she said softly, "and all that it means." Takawatin's smile transformed his usually solemn face. With gentle movements, he took a small leather thong from his pouch and threaded it through a hole in the carving, creating a pendant which he placed around her neck. "Now all will know my intentions," he said. "The courtship begins." As they walked back to camp together, a comfortable distance between them but their future drawing closer, Catherine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead would hold challenges, cultural differences to navigate, prejudices to overcome, perhaps even dangers from both worlds they bridged, but they would face them together. That night, as she lay in her teepee listening to the sounds of the camp settling into darkness, Catherine touched the carved horse resting against her collarbone. She thought of her former life, the homestead, the rigid expectations, the fear of Indian raids, and realized how profoundly she had been transformed. What had begun as captivity had become liberation. What had been foreign now felt like home. And Takawatin, once an enemy to be feared, had become the man she chose freely, with clear eyes and an open heart. The seasons turned as Catherine's new life took root among the Comanche. Winter brought snow that blanketed the plains, and the tribe moved their camp to a sheltered valley where tall bluffs provided protection from bitter north winds. Catherine, now fluent in Comanche language and customs, had fully embraced her identity as Puha Quitao. Her courtship with Takawatin progressed according to tribal traditions, with formal visits, exchanges of gifts, and growing approval from both families. On a crisp morning as winter began to loosen its grip, Catherine sat with Nata learning to embroider porcupine quills onto a ceremonial pouch. part of her wedding preparations. The older woman had become like a mother to her, patient in teaching and generous with her knowledge. "Your hands grow skilled," Nada commented, examining Catherine's neat stitches. "You will make a fine wife for my son." Catherine smiled, warmth filling her chest at these words of approval. "I still have much to learn." "All women do, until death," Nata replied with wisdom born of experience. "But you learn faster than most." She paused her work, fixing Catherine with a serious gaze. "Soon you will be married. Are you certain this is what your heart truly wants?" Catherine set down her needle, considering the question with the honesty it deserved. "When I first came here, I thought only of survival, then of understanding. Now," she touched the carved horse pendant she always wore, "now I think of belonging. Yes, this is what my heart wants." Nata nodded, satisfied. "Then we will continue preparing for the ceremony when the moon of green grass arrives." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by shouts from the perimeter of the camp. Warriors rushed toward their horses as a scout galloped in, calling out news in rapid Comanche. Catherine caught enough to understand. White soldiers approaching, a large group. Takawatan appeared at the entrance of the teepee, his expression grave. "You must stay hidden," he told Catherine. "The bluecoats come with many rifles. They search for camps." "How many?" she asked, already rising to her feet. "2 hands of men," he replied, showing 10 fingers. "With a guide who knows our ways, a half-blood tracker." Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. If the soldiers discovered her, a white woman living willingly among the Comanche, preparing to marry one of their warriors, the consequences could be severe for both her and the tribe. "What will you do?" she asked. "We cannot fight so many with good weapons," Takawatan said pragmatically. "The women, children, and elders will hide in the caves beyond the bluff. Warriors will lead the soldiers away from camp, then circle back when it is safe." Chief Semena appeared, conferring quickly with his son before addressing Catherine. "If they find you, they will take you by force and punish our people. You must go with the others to the caves." Catherine nodded, gathering only essential items: her knife, a water skin, and a small medicine pouch Nada had given her. As she prepared to leave with the non-warriors, Takawatan pulled her aside. "No matter what happens," he said intently, "know that my heart belongs to you. If we are separated, I will find you again." "And I you," Catherine promised, memorizing his face as if it might be the last time she saw it. The evacuation of the camp proceeded with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, most teepees were dismantled, supplies hidden or packed onto travois pulled by dogs and older horses. The warriors mounted their fastest ponies, preparing to lead the soldiers on a lengthy chase away from the hidden caves. Catherine helped Nata and the other women shepherd children toward the network of caves in the limestone bluff, overlooking their winter camp. They had just reached the narrow entrance when a shout went up from one of the last warriors to leave. "They come from both sides. The tracker found our trail." Catherine turned to see riders appearing at the far end of the valley, blue uniforms visible even at a distance. The soldiers had split their forces, approaching from multiple directions to trap the Comanche between them. The warriors' warning had come barely in time. "Get inside, quickly," she urged the women and children, helping the elders navigate the steep path to the cave entrance. From this vantage point, she could see Takawatan and the other mounted warriors regrouping, preparing to charge toward the smaller group of soldiers to create an escape route. As the last child disappeared into the cave, Catherine made a split-second decision. Instead of following them inside, she scrambled down a different path, one that would intercept the warriors before they engaged the soldiers. "Takawatan," she called as she ran. "Wait!" He wheeled his horse around, surprise and alarm crossing his face as he saw her exposed on the hillside. "Go back to the caves." "No," Catherine replied firmly. "I can help." She pointed to the approaching soldiers. "I know their leader, Captain Miller. He was stationed at the fort near our homestead. He may listen to me." Takawatin's expression hardened. "They will take you." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but they might spare the tribe if I go willingly and explain." The other warriors watched this exchange with growing impatience, eager to attack before they lost the advantage of surprise. Chief Semena, however, studied Catherine thoughtfully. You would risk returning to the whites to protect our people? He asked. I would risk anything for my family, Catherine answered, using the Comanche word that encompassed not just blood relations, but all who were bound by loyalty and love. Let me speak to them first. If they will not listen, then you must fight. After a tense moment, the chief nodded. So be it, but Takawatin goes with you until it is safe. They approached the soldiers cautiously, Catherine walking ahead with her hands visible, Takawatin following on horseback at a distance that allowed quick retreat if needed. The soldiers raised their rifles, but Captain Miller, recognizing Catherine despite her Comanche dress and sun-darkened skin, ordered them to hold their fire. Miss Dawson, he called incredulously. Catherine Dawson? Yes, Captain, she replied in English that felt strangely awkward after months of speaking Comanche. Please lower your weapons. I wish to talk. Miller signaled his men to keep their rifles ready but pointed downward. We thought you dead, girl. Your brother's been searching for months. Catherine's heart lurched. My brother lives? Thomas is alive? Wounded in the raid but recovered, Miller confirmed. He's with the other half of our patrol, approaching from the south. His gaze shifted to Takawatin, who sat motionless on his horse. Are you a captive? Has this savage hurt you? Catherine straightened, her voice firm. I am no captive, Captain. I choose to live with the Penateka Comanche of my own free will. This man, she gestured to Takawatin, is the son of their chief, and soon to be my husband. Miller's face registered shock, then disgust. That's not possible. You've been confused by your ordeal, Miss Dawson. We're taking you back to civilization where you belong. My place is here, Catherine insisted. But I will come speak with my brother, if you promise no harm will come to this camp or its people. The captain's expression hardened. I can't make such a promise. We have orders to find Comanche camps and drive them to the reservation. Too many settlers have died. And too many Comanche have died defending lands that were theirs for generations. Catherine countered. There can be another way. Peaceful coexistence. A commotion from the south interrupted their tense negotiation. A second group of soldiers appeared. Among them a tall man with copper hair similar to Catherine's, Thomas Dawson. Kate! He shouted, spurring his horse forward despite the captain's order to hold position. Thomas! Catherine called back, emotion threatening to overwhelm her composure. Her brother reached them, dismounting in a rush and embracing Catherine fiercely. I thought you dead, he said, voice breaking. Or worse. I'm well, Thomas, she assured him, returning his embrace before stepping back. But things have changed. I've changed. Thomas looked her over, taking in her Comanche clothing, the intricate braids in her hair, the pendant around her neck. His expression shifted from joy to confusion. What's happened to you, Kate? Catherine took a deep breath, then explained everything, her months among the Comanche, how she had learned their ways, saved Takawatin from the rattlesnake bite, and chosen to remain with the tribe. Throughout her explanation, Thomas's expression cycled through disbelief, concern, and finally, a reluctant understanding. You truly wish to stay with them? With him? He asked, glancing at Takawatin, who had moved his horse closer as they talked. I do, Catherine said simply. I've found a life here that fulfills me in ways my old life never could. But I grieved for you, Thomas. I'm overjoyed to find you alive. Captain Miller interjected. This is absurd. No white woman chooses to live with savages. You're coming back with us, Miss Dawson. Thomas, however, studied his sister's face carefully. Kate has always known her own mind, Captain. If she says this is her choice, I believe her. He turned back to Catherine. But what of me? Am I to lose my only remaining family? Catherine reached for her brother's hand. You need not lose me. The Comanche trade with white settlements several times a year. We could arrange meetings, perhaps. She hesitated, then pressed on. Perhaps you could even attend my wedding when the moon of green grass comes. The captain sputtered in protest, but Thomas raised a hand to silence him. I need to speak with my sister alone, Captain. Then with her, intended. He said the last word with effort, but without mockery. What followed was a lengthy negotiation, first between siblings reconnecting across a cultural divide, then between Thomas and Takawatin with Catherine translating, and finally including Captain Miller and Chief Peruasamina. By sunset, an unprecedented agreement had been reached. The soldiers would report that the Comanche band had moved north, buying the tribe time before further patrols searched the area. In exchange, the Penateca would avoid raiding any settlements within an agreed boundary. Thomas would remain for several days as a guest of the tribe to attend Catherine's wedding, which was moved forward with the blessing of all involved. And a system of communication would be established through trusted traders, allowing Catherine to maintain contact with her brother. 2 weeks later, as spring's first green touched the plains, Catherine stood beside Takawatan before the entire tribe and her brother. Dressed in ceremonial clothing that married Comanche traditions with subtle elements of her heritage, she participated in the rituals that would bind her forever to the man who had once been a stranger from an enemy people. "Two worlds meet in you," Chief Peruasamina said, as he blessed their union. "May your joining bring understanding where there has been fear, peace where there has been war." Thomas, uncomfortable but resolute in his support, presented the couple with a gift, a pair of silver bands crafted by a silversmith in the nearest town. "Something from your first world to take into your new one," he told his sister. As night fell and celebration fires burned bright, Catherine and Takawatan slipped away to a new teepee prepared for them at the edge of camp. Under a canopy of stars, they spoke of the future, children they hoped would inherit the strength of both their cultures, wisdom they would share with their tribe, bridges they might build between worlds long divided by misunderstanding and bloodshed. "When the rattlesnake struck," Takawatan said, holding Catherine close, "I thought it was taking my life. Instead, it gave me a new one. Perhaps that is the greatest medicine," Catherine replied, finding blessing in what first appears to be poison. As spring blossomed into summer, word spread among both settlers and tribes of the white woman who had chosen to become Comanche, who had created a small island of peace in a land too often torn by conflict. Some dismissed it as a curiosity, others as a betrayal of her race. But for those willing to listen, including a growing circle of traders, missionaries, and progressive tribal leaders, Catherine and Takawatan's union represented something profound. Hope that understanding could triumph over hatred, that love could transcend boundaries that armies could not breach. And in the years that followed, as children with copper hair and dark eyes played in their teepee, as Thomas's visits became regular events anticipated by the entire tribe, as small acts of cooperation replaced former hostilities, that hope grew roots as deep and enduring as those of the ancient cottonwoods that witnessed their love's beginning, with the bite of a rattlesnake and the courage of a woman who saw beyond fear to the heart of a warrior.